The UFC has a huge problem right now. Undeserved title shots. Now, as a self-proclaimed hardcore fan of the sport as myself, I personally like whenever guys have earned their way to a title shot. They're on a win streak. They've beaten great guys, and it's undeniable they deserve to fight for the belt. And that just hasn't been the case recently. Most of the guys recently that have been getting title shots in the last 2 years, which is what we're going to cover in this video, do not deserve it or did not deserve it at all. Whether they're coming off a loss, whether the wins they have were very mid, or they had a number one contender who was obviously next in line, but the UFC decided, no, screw them, we're going to give this guy a title shot. And yeah, some of these guys, or one guy in this video got a title shot in his debut, which is crazy. And the UFC seems to be going in a way of boxing in the sense that they're giving guys fights at the top that don't necessarily deserve it. And it's just very reckless. And that's one thing the UFC has always done over boxing. The top guys fight the top guys. And I hate to see the UFC slowly going away from this. Like, I'm not saying the guys in this video aren't top level. What I'm saying is, let's give the guys who deserve a title shot a title shot. Stop giving it out due to politics or just nonsense, man. I want to see the best fight the best. I don't want to see somebody who's washed up and hasn't won a fight in years get a title shot. And we've saw that. So let's get right into it. I'm going to go over every single title shot of the last 2 years that was undeserved and talk about why it was undeserved and how going forward I want to see the UFC give the deserving contenders title shots and not guys that are on losing streaks or debuting in the UFC. So let's get right into it. Umar Nurmagomedov very recently got a title shot against Merab Dvalishvili, and he lost, which is crazy to say because I thought he was going to beat Merab. But looking at his last 5 wins, man, it's just his only top 10 win was Corey Sandhagen. He was dropped by the guy named Bezkat Amakan. Yeah, fair enough, a good win over Raoni Barcelos with a KO, but Nate Maness, a decision? That guy's terrible. Brian Kelleher is horrible. So I'm pretty sure Brian Kelleher has a negative UFC record, and Nate Maness is nothing special. He's been beat a couple times before that. So it's like Umar to get a title shot, or maybe he was undefeated at the time. Either way, Umar to get a title shot over Merab. Even though I was picking him, that doesn't mean that he deserves the title shot just because I picked him to win. He did not deserve the title shot. He had 1 win in the top 10 over his entire UFC career. And the second guy under Corey Sandhagen, guaranteed, you can't even tell me who this guy is. He doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. And he dropped Umar. And it's like, it was very obvious that the UFC was pushing him to get a title shot because of the Nurmagomedov last name. They were trying to get another Nurmagomedov as champion just to promote Khabib's gym more, it seems. And they failed because Merab cardio mogged him. But definitely, although what I've said prior, you definitely could argue that you could have gave Petr Yan a title shot. You even could, I'm not sure who else, but you could have, Petr Yan deserved a title shot over Umar. Even if he got dominated 50-45, he was coming off of 2 wins. And, what's his name? Merab was talking about how he wanted to rematch Yan. And now that we saw how the Umar fight went, maybe that should have been the fight they made in the first place. But either way, UFC decided to give a title shot to Umar. It failed. He lost. He's no longer undefeated. So yeah, that's the first example. And listen, also in this video, I want to explain that I understand that not every single title shot is going to be deserved and not everything is peaches and creamville, but it seems like more and more and more as we get further and further into the UFC, it just feels like more and more guys are getting undeserved title shots. That's the issue I'm having. It used to be the best guy fought for the title. Now it seems like what the UFC's agenda is, that's who they want to fight for the title. You get what I'm saying? So let's get on to the next one where we had Stipe Miocic against Jon Jones get a title shot. Now this was an absolute abomination because Stipe Miocic hadn't fought in nearly 4 years, right? Not to mention he was coming off a KO loss, hasn't fought in 4 years, 42 years old, ranked number 8 in the heavyweight division. And wait, that's not even the best part. You guys ready? Oh wait, there's an interim champion active wanting to fight Jon Jones. And the UFC allows Jon Jones to fight Stipe Miocic to build his legacy, even though I don't think Stipe at 42 really does nothing for Jon Jones' legacy. And obviously Jon Jones went in there and destroyed him, but it's like, why give Stipe a title shot? This was embarrassing. This is the worst case of it in this entire video, in my opinion. An actor of interim champion, ready to fight the champion, and you give it to a Stipe Miocic. I don't care how long Jon Jones has been dominating the sport. At the end of the day, if there's an interim champion, you don't get to fight a 42-year-old firefighter. No, screw that. The title shot 100% should have went to Tom Aspinall. He deserved it. He's the interim champion, and he had a title defense of his interim championship, and the UFC still went on with the Stipe fight. It was an embarrassment, and I'm so happy in the build-up to the fight. All they talked about was Tom Aspinall. It was amazing seeing John Jones having to answer those questions. But yeah, old man Stippy came back at 42, got absolutely ragdolled by John Jones and destroyed in the third round. Well, the fact that John Jones nearly took him to the fourth is embarrassing. But yeah, obviously this is the worst case of it recently. And this is really the inspiration for this video. Seeing a 42-year-old, listen, I love Stipe Miocic. He was an amazing fighter in his prime. But this guy is years out of his prime, and he is coming off a loss, and he hadn't fought nearly 4 years. It's like, come on, man. Where's the meritocracy of the sport? So yeah, Stipe at 309 against Jones was definitely one of the worst case of it. Let's get on to the next one, which was Kai Asakura getting a title shot in his UFC debut. Now, listen, this might be one that you can excuse because Kai Asakura, I mean, the flyweight division of the UFC is not the best. It's obvious that Pantoja has ran through Moreno twice. He's ran through Roy Val twice. He has a win over Kai Kara France. Miguel Cap wasn't on the win streak. So I get it in a sense that to give him a title shot. But even if you look at Kai Asakura's opponents, I mean, he was only on a 2-fight win streak. And of the 3 guys he beat in his win streak, 3 of them didn't even have Wikipedia pages. What does that tell you? They're not popular and they're probably not good fighters. I'm not even trying to be a hater, but who are these guys he beat? Guaranteed, you guys can't tell me a single win these guys that he beat has. But either way, he gets a title shot in his UFC debut, and Pantoja proves once again that he's nowhere near the level of UFC because he gets in there and he absolutely destroys Kai Asakura in 2 rounds, chokes him out, and it's a done deal. It's like, okay, why are we giving guys title shots in their debut? I get it. Build the market in Japan. There's no one else at flyweight. This is probably one of the more excusable ones in the entire video, given that the flyweight division had already been defeated so much by Pantoja. They were like, all right, give a guy in his debut a title shot because there's nothing going on at flyweight. But man, it's like, come on, dude. There are better options than a guy in his debut, freaking Dragon Ball Z maxing over here to get a title shot. But yeah, this is, like I said, this is not the worst of them. I just wanted to point this one out. Let's get on to the next one. And these are all within the last 2 years, just so you guys know. Khalil Rountree getting a title shot against Alex Pereira at UFC 307. Now, this was an abomination because Magomed Ankalaev was obviously the #1 contender. It couldn't be any more clear that it should have been Magomed Ankalaev next, who was on like an 11-fight unbeaten streak and hadn't lost in forever. And what do? They booked Pereira versus Khalil Rountree. Another striker, another free win for Pereira. Obviously, Pereira was always going to school Khalil Rountree. And I'm not even trying to dog on Khalil Rountree, but his 5-fight win streak might be the least impressive win streak ever in UFC history. Chris Daukaus was on like a 4-fight losing streak, all finishes. He robbed Dustin Jacoby, very obviously. He fought Anthony Smith, who was out of shape on short notice. Carl Robeson sucks, and Modestas Bakauskas, I guess that was a solid win. But it's like, this is the most unimpressive 5-fight win streak I've ever seen. And no disrespect to Khalil Rountree, I'm just calling it what it is. And then they obviously have a #1 contender in the division in Magomed Ankalaev, who's obviously there, ready to fight for the title. So we can believe that. I know there was politics behind the scene on where the fight was going to go down, but the fact that the UFC went ahead and gave Khalil Rountree a title shot with an obvious #1 contender that deserved it was just an abomination. And in the fight, yeah, sure, Khalil did great until round 4 where he got absolutely destroyed. Also, another point to add to this video, I'm not necessarily saying if the guy doesn't deserve the title shot, he can't be competitive, you know? It's not about how good you did in the fight. Some of these guys that didn't deserve the title shot even won the fight. It's the fact that they didn't deserve it in the first place. Why are we giving out shots to guys who don't deserve it? Let's go into the pecking order. The guys who are at the top deserve to fight for the titles before the guys who are at the bottom. It's that simple. I think Khalil Rountree was #8 in the division whenever he fought Pereira for a title shot. And yeah, Pereira, although struggled in the early rounds, he hit his stride in the 3rd and 4th and absolutely blew past Khalil Rountree. I am happy that Alex Pereira is fighting Ankalaev at UFC 313. Finally, the division can restore order. But yeah, this was another case of an undeserved title shot. Let's get on to the next one, which was Israel Adesanya against Dricus du Plessis. Now, a lot of people will go ahead and say, dude, Adesanya deserved his rematch for the belt because he never got it. No, he got it. He lost to Alex Pereira. He got his rematch. He KO'd Alex Pereira, and then he lost to Sean Strickland again. You don't get another title shot coming off a loss. You already got your title shot for being a reigning champion. This was undeserved, obviously. Coming off a loss, getting dominated by Sean Strickland, sits out for nearly an entire year, comes back and gets a title shot against DDP, looks solid, but then ends up getting submitted. And Adesanya was, what, 2-3? Or 3-2 in his last 5 to get this title shot. And you could argue 2-3 if you count that win against Robert Whittaker a loss because it was so close. Could have went either way. But Yeah, man, Izzy, especially now, if you look at it, he definitely did deserve a title shot because he's way past his prime. But obviously, the UFC are a fan of Izzy. He has a big fan base. He was a dominant champion, so that's probably why they went with it. But there was other guys you could have gave a title shot. Hell, I'd rather see Nasruddin Imavov get a title shot over Izzy at this point. I'd rather see Hamza get a title shot over Izzy at this point. But it's like they went with Izzy, and this is not in this video, but now they're going with Sean Strickland over Hamza for UFC 312, and it's like, why does Sean Strickland deserve a title shot? You know, he went to a pitter-patter split decision with Paulo Costa, and sure, he had a really close fight with Dricus, and he lost the belt to a razor close split decision. But what about Hamza, who just absolutely destroyed Robert Whittaker in the first round? And that is not worthy of a title shot, but going to a split decision with Paulo Costa, who's 1-4 in his last 5 is, I don't know, that's just very sus and questionable. So 2 undeserved title shots in the middleweight division very recently. Let's get on to the next one, which was Dustin Poirier fighting Islam Makhachev at UFC 302. Now listen, I love Dustin Poirier. He's one of my favorite fighters in the UFC, in history of the UFC. I love him. He's from my hometown. But let's be real, he did not deserve this title shot against Islam Makhachev. Although he pushed Islam to the brink and cut him up and won some rounds against him, that doesn't mean anything because he didn't deserve it in the first place. He had just come off a KO loss to Gaethje. Sure, he came in there and KO'd BSD, but now that we know what we know, BSD ain't nothing special. He's terrible. He got destroyed by Moicano and for absolutely fraud checked. So it's like Dustin Poirier gets a win over the number 12 Benoit Saint Denis on a 1-fight win streak, and that warrants a title shot when he's 2-2 in his last 4. It's like, come on, man. Or 3-2 in his last 4, losing to Oliveira, losing to Justin Gaethje, both by finish, by the way. And they throw him in there against Makhachev. I get it. If it's Makhachev, it's a new name, but you could have arguably gave it to Arman Sarukian. You could have arguably gave it Charles Oliveira a rematch. I understand some of those guys were coming off of losses, but I'm sorry, man. A 1-fight win streak and you get a title shot against Islam. And like I said, it's not about how they do in the fights. It's the fact that they got the title shot in the first place. I love DP, but he did not deserve this title shot. And yeah, especially since he was already 0-2 in title fights. They could have went with somebody else. They went with DP and he lost. So let's get on to the next one, which is Steve Erceg. This is a crazy one. Steve Erceg comes into the UFC 3-0, and this guy, I kid you not, gets a title shot by KO and Matt Schnell. Just let that sink in. A KO over Matt Schnell, who is one of the chinniest fighters in UFC history. You have to be incredibly chinny to be getting KO'd at flyweight consistently, and that's exactly who Matt Schnell is. Steve Erceg, Astro Boy, comes in relatively unknown, number 9 in the division, I believe, and gets a title shot at UFC 301 against Alessandro Pantoja. There were plenty of top guys at the top of the division that you could have went with. They went with number 9, Steve Erceg. And granted, you could arguably score the fight for him against Pantoja, but that's not the point. The point is he never deserved a title shot in the first place. And yeah, look what happened. He got a close fight against Pantoja. Then he fights the next guy who's higher ranked than him in Kai France and gets KO'd. And it's like, come on, dude. Let's stop giving these newcomers in the UFC title shots. Listen, I love Australia. I love the Australian fighters, but let's be real. Astro Boy, Steve Erceg did not deserve a title shot. And now he's getting another number 1 contenders fight against Brandon Moreno, which is absolutely insane. Why is this guy fighting Brandon Moreno when he's coming off a KO loss and he's fighting number 2 in the division? It doesn't make any sense. But yeah, this is another case of it at UFC 301. And this headlined the card. And to see a guy who's ranked number 8 come and get a title shot against Pantoja and nearly beat him was not a good look for the flyweight division. So yeah, another case of this at UFC 301. Let's get on to the next one. These are all within the last 2 years, just to show you guys how often this happens. Marlon Chito Vera getting a shot against O'Malley at UFC 299. The only reason this fight happened is because Marlon Vera beat Sean O'Malley, and Sean O'Malley called for the fight. He wanted to right that wrong. He wanted to prove the Marlon Vera fight was a fluke. And he did, but let's not pretend like Marlon Vera didn't just get destroyed by Corey Sandhagen, arguably 50-45. And then he got a win over aging Pedro Munoz. And outside of that, look who he's beat. Dominic Cruz, who was almost 40. Rob Font, who was almost 40. Frankie Edgar, who was 40. That's the 3 wins he gets. And then he gets destroyed by Corey Sandhagen, beats Pedro Munoz, and then he gets a rematch against O'Malley on one of the biggest cards of the year at 299. It's like, come on, man. It's funny because Marlon Vera fought Sean O'Malley on the same card. Dustin Poirier beat BSD. So we had a guy getting an undeserved title shot versus a guy who won to get an undeserved title shot. That's pretty funny. But yeah, Marlon Vera, I've always thought he was mid. And yeah, man, the UFC, I guess, let Sean O'Malley do his thing. They wanted him to get that fight back, and he got it back. It was uncompetitive. It was a 50-45 beatdown. Sean O'Malley was a step ahead every single step of the way. But It should have been a guy maybe like Piotr Jan, or no, not Piotr Jan. He was coming off a loss. It should have been a guy like Merab getting the title shot before Marlon Vera. It shouldn't have been Merab later in the year. It should have been Merab first. And maybe if Vera got a win or 2 more wins, he could have got his title shot. But the UFC went ahead with it. He got destroyed, looked embarrassing, and hasn't won a fight since, I do not think. So, yeah, this is another example of it at UFC 299. Let's go back 3 cards before. Another undeserved title shot. Colby Covington. He fights Jorge Masvidal 2.5 or a year and a half before his title shot. That's his last win, right? He's 2-2. He's 2-2 in his last 4, right? And then he goes and beats Jorge Masvidal, sits out a year and a half, and he's awarded a title shot against Leon Edwards because he was he agreed to be the backup fighter for the last title fight against Usman and Leon. Extremely weird. Obviously, I think this is politically motivated by Colby having ties to Trump and Trump being in cahoots with Dana. Maybe they slid him a title shot under the table, but it's like Colby was already 0-2 in title shots against Kamaru. He was coming off a 1 win over retired Jorge Masvidal. Before that, he had already got another undeserved title shot against Kamaru. He lost. And then in the Leon fight, he shows up absolutely embarrassing and gets steamrolled. It's like proving once again, why are we giving Colby Covington unlimited title shots? This guy literally is a title shot merchant. He's had 3 title shots, 2 against Usman, 1 against Leon Edwards, and he's lost all 3 of them. So what are we going to do? Is Colby going to get a win over what? He's going to get a win over Wonder Boy, and we're going to throw him in there again in a title shot? It's like, come on, man. Finally, Colby Covington's finally falling down the division to number 9. Hopefully don't think the UFC will ever give him a title shot again, as I don't even think he can beat anybody in the top 15 of welterweight. Maybe Burns or Stephen Thompson, but even that's a stretch. But yeah, this is another example at UFC 296 of Colby Covington getting an undeserved title shot. Let's get on to the next one. Sean Strickland, a title shot at UFC 293 against Adesanya. This one isn't the worst one ever. He was on a 2-fight win streak against Abus and against Nasruddin Imavov, and those wins have aged well, as Abus has gotten some wins, and Nasruddin is now a top contender in the division, but at the time, they weren't that impressive. Nasruddin wasn't in the top 5. Abus was a UFC newcomer, but nobody had any idea who he was, and the UFC awards Sean Strickland a title shot against Izzy. Granted, he capitalized, and he absolutely destroyed Izzy, I think 4-1, and made Israel Adesanya look absolutely silly in the striking, just destroy him with his boxing and his defense, but like I said, it's not about how they perform in the fights. It's the fact that he didn't deserve it in the first place. You could have gave it to a Dricus du Plessis. Fair enough, Dricus was injured. They wanted Adesanya to fight on the Australia card. Dricus was injured, so they throw Sean Strickland in there. As I said in the video at the beginning, sometimes these title shots have to happen undeserved because there are circumstances, but I just feel like recently in the UFC, it's been abundant. It's been nonstop. It seems like most title shots are undeserved these days, and it's almost seeming like it's a rare thing for the UFC to put a deserving contender in there. I don't know, but yeah, Sean Strickland getting a title shot against Izzy. Obviously, he capitalized on it. He became the champion and then lost to DDP a couple months later. But yeah, another case of it. And the last one, this one happened a little over 2 years ago. Jamal Hill getting a title shot against Glover Teixeira. I always thought Jamal Hill wasn't that great, and it's proven now that he's going on a 2-fight losing streak against Pereira and Yeri. Granted, they are very good, but it's like Jamal Hill's footwork is laughable, and he got a title shot against an aging 43-year-old Glover Teixeira. He was number 7 in the division. The UFC threw together this title shot because they had a sour taste in their mouth about Ankalaev and Blachowicz fighting to a draw for a title shot. Dana White was very salty about that, so he was like, you know what? You do Jamal Hill versus Glover Teixeira in January for the title. That's what you do. Yeah, number 7 versus 43-year-old Glover. Seems like a great idea for a title shot. Jamal Hill beats up Glover for 5 rounds. Shocker, a 43-year-old Glover. Who would have thought? And then who was coming off that war with Yeri. And then Jamal Hill gets injured, gets stripped of the title, comes back, gets destroyed by Pereira, and then comes back later and gets destroyed by Yeri earlier this year. So it's like Jamal Hill should have never got a title shot. I don't think he was ever UFC champion caliber. He's decent, but he's not great. I mean, look at the wins he got before he get his title shot. Jimmy Crute is terrible. Johnny Walker's been chinned by literally everybody on the UFC roster at this point, flyweights included. Thiago Santos, aging, was like 37, 38 at the time, and he struggled in that fight. Took him to like the 4th round to finish him. So definitely Jamal Hill didn't deserve a title shot. Now, with that being said, guys, we're at the end of the video. I appreciate you watching, but my point of this video was not to say that we live in Peaches and Creamville and every single title shot is going to be under perfect circumstances and it's always going to go to the deserving contender. That's not my point. I understand sometimes short notice fights come about, guys pull out, stuff happens, etc. But it seems to me recently, in the last 2 or so years, the UFC has gone above and beyond to give guys undeserving title shots whenever there's clear-cut number one contenders, when there's interim champions with a title defense, guys in their debut. It's like, what are we doing? The UFC, if they don't get back to meritocracy and giving guys title shots that deserve it, we're going to end up in a sport just like boxing, where it's going to be the top guys just ducking each other, and then you're going to get a bunch of random fights that nobody cares about for big paydays. It's like, that's where we're headed. I don't want to see that. I love the UFC. It's literally my passion. So please, Dana White and the UFC, let's give number one contenders a title shot. We're headed in the right direction. We got Ankalaev fighting for the title. I want to see Ilia Topuria defend against Mavzar or Diego Lopez. Let's get him fighting that. I mean, I know I call for the super fight, and I'm excited about it, but honestly, I'd like to see Ilia defend his title a couple more times. It would build it up. Let's rebook Islam versus Arman Sarukian. Let's book Bilal versus Shavkat. Drickus is fighting Strickland. He should be fighting Hamza, you know? Pereira's fighting Ankalaev. Great. Let's book John Jones versus Aspinall and stop the ducking. It's like, I don't know, man. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you agree? Are you frustrated with the abundance of undeserved title shots in the UFC? And does it bother you as much as it bothers me? Because although I'm a fan of the sport and I'm going to watch all these fights, there's something to be said about guys continuously getting undeserved title shots. Let's give the rightful number one guys their shot. And yeah, that's all I really want. That's all a true fan of the sport can ask for. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. As always, subscribe to the channel if you're new. Leave a like if you enjoyed. I always appreciate it, guys. I'm out, and peace.